Shalom Chaverim! I'm Rafi.
I'm Daniella.
And you are watching or listening to Bnei Akiva's brand new podcast, Past and Present.
You can find us on YouTube, Spotify and Facebook. We'll be interviewing Chaverim of Bnei Akiva of the past and present to share with you some exciting insights into their lives. Shalom Chaverim, welcome back to Past and Present. Today we are very honored to be joined by an amazing couple from Israel who truly live the life of Bnei Akiva and have so much to share with us. So Sarah and Jason, welcome. I'm not going to say too much because I know you're going to introduce yourselves, but thank you so much for joining us today.
It's our pleasure.
So without any further ado, the first question, as Daniella alluded to, is please introduce yourselves a bit about who you are, what you do, background. Please feel free to share.
Okay, so I'll start. Okay, my name is Sarah Sharman Moser, and I grew up in Chigwell. And when I was 9, my family moved to Portsmouth on the south coast. I moved back to London when I was a teenager. I was involved in Bnei Akiva camps, I don't know, from the age of 10, something like that. I was on Hachshara Torah for 2 years in Israel, came back to study at university in England, met Jason, and we made Aliyah in 1998, which is 23 years ago, at which point we lived in Kibbutz Ein Surim for a few years, and we are now living in Nov Ayalon, near Modi'in, for anyone that doesn't know. Jason?
Okay, yeah, quick word. So I lived in Edgware, grew up in Edgware, was always in Edgware, didn't move around in the same way. Also, member of Bnei Akiva from age, however young you can be to join Bnei Akiva. Went to camps. I did not go to Hachshara. When in university, I was firstly Rosh Sviva in Belmont, and then after that, what we used to call a hit bogger. I don't know if we still have those things. A bogrim who travel around different Shabbatot, different Svivot to visit, particularly at Shabbat Lashem. And then I took actually a year out of university to be Mazkir of Bnei Akiva for a year in 1996-7, 5757. And then met Sarah, and Sarah's told you the rest. So that's.
Well, I mean, we've got so much to go through, but if I may pick up on one thing, which is something that Sarah said, which is you did Hachsharat Torah for 2 years.
So the truth was that 2 years was always a thing, but very few people did it. It was more common for the boys to do it than the girls. So I spent a year in Madreshet Harova, which is where Hachsharat Torah was, and I think it still is one of the places that girls can go to. And we spent time on Kibbutz Levi, which was a really amazing experience. That was the time when we used to go to Kibbutz. And then I just couldn't bring myself to come back to England yet. And I went for a second year to Orot, which I then decided, okay, now, I mean, I even applied to university in Israel, but I decided, no, I needed to come back to England. I wanted to study in London. And the truth was I had a great 3 years doing some studying and lots of Bnei Akiva and camps and really having a good time. So I'm really pleased about that. 2 years is recommended for everybody. I recommend it.
I was fortunate to do 2 years in Israel. I went to Yeshiva HaKotel. But what's an interesting distinction is the Hachsharat Torah program nowadays is 1 year. So those who decide to do a second year, it's independent of the first. So I think that's a slight distinction. But yeah.
It was also separate then, but it was sort of, I don't know if it was really a thing, but they talked, not many people stayed. There was one other girl that stayed as well, but most people came back.
Well, great.
I'd be interested to hear, what do you both do today for a living? Or what have you done over the course of your careers?
Okay, so professionally, I work as an actuary. For those of you who don't know what an actuary is, I will explain. An actuary is someone who does statistics, usually for insurance companies or pension funds. So I work for Menorah Insurance Company as an actuary in the non-life business. We mentioned previously that when we came back to Israel, we were in Ein Sarim for a few years. Ein Sarim, we were there because I was studying at the now defunct Yeshivat HaKibbutz Hadati southern branch in Ein Sarim, where I studied in the, I guess you can call it the kollel there. I studied for Rabbanit Smicha, so I also am a Rav on the side. I volunteer as a Rav for Tzoa and perform weddings in my spare time. And additionally, just when I have some additional spare time, I also volunteer for Madura and I drive an ambulance.
Oh.
Which we have some great stories, but it's not really relevant today. we can tell you another time about the,
Okay.
you know, like the beeper going off just as we're starting Seder night and Jason disappearing for, you know, half an hour or something. That, you know, it's cool. We have good stories. We'll tell you one afterwards.
What do you do?
I studied pharmacy in London, and I worked for a few years as a pharmacist, and about nearly 10 years ago, I moved into medical research in Maccabi Healthcare, where we do epidemiological health research, which I think since COVID started, most people know what an epidemiology is, so at least, you know, something good came out of it. But I'm also a Yoetzet Halacha, studied in Nishmat, and I work on the hotline for Nishmat, which is a really amazing experience. And, you know, thank God for Midrashot today. What else do I do? I teach Tanakh in two Midrashot just on the side. And also Madrachat Kalot for Torah and for religious girls, for non-religious couples that are getting married, which is actually one of the best things that I enjoy, because, you know, you get to know people from all different walks of life and all different, you know, religious, non-religious, different places around the world even, and we learn about different people, and I think it's important for us all to listen to other people's views and respect them, and there's not really enough of that in the world today, unfortunately.
I'd be really interested to know how Bnei Akiva has shaped the people that you are today.
Well, obviously, the most important thing about Bnei Akiva was that we met in Bnei Akiva. So the fact that we are together is due to Bnei Akiva. So
I wasn't going to say that.
That's obviously the most important thing.
It didn't even occur to me. I can tell you that I went to my first Bnei Akiva meeting. I still remember it. I think I was 6 in Chigwell. And I remember coming home and telling my parents, I'm going to make Aliyah. So great brainwashing Bnei Akiva there at the age of 6. But the truth is, even though they probably didn't like pay any attention, it always stayed with me. And I think that the ideology that Bnei Akiva gave us, that you call it what you want, but, you know, the belief in Torah and Avodah, and obviously Aliyah, but again, I say that a little bit of care, because not everybody makes Aliyah, not everybody wants to make Aliyah, and everyone has to do what they want to do. But I think it gave us something really positive and meaningful and strong to believe in, and to take with us through the years and through the teenage years, which are, you know, volatile sometimes, and then to be madrachim and teach the next generation that this is something really important. It's something that speaks to our heart. It's something that we believe in. And the fact that Bnei Akiva, I don't know about now, but there were so many different types of people there. You know, there were religious kids and there were non-religious kids, and everybody just had a great time together. And there was something really special about that. As chanichim and also as madrachim afterwards, you know, we had a great time. And so, and I always found that the informal type of education, whereby you could have 5 tochniot a day at Machane, and they're all to do with the same thing, but it's so subtle that you only realize it at the end of the day as a chanich. And as a madrich, obviously, you understand it a little bit more than that, was a great way of teaching and learning. So Bnei Akiva certainly really affected me. All the way through, I stuck to it and I believed in it. And in fact, when I was in university and I said, I'm not going out with anyone that doesn't want to make Aliyah, that was a no-go. And people were like, oh, don't be silly, you know. And I said, no, I can't do that. And the truth is, we never spoke about Aliyah because it was just a given we were going to make Aliyah. And in fact, I remember Jason coming back from Machane once when you were Rosh of Gimel or something, saying, oh, we have to talk about ideology, and we never did. but do you remember that? Because it was obvious. It was something we didn't even need to talk about, which not everybody has it that easy, I guess. But for us, it was really it was obvious. So.
Well, it's going on that topic then of Rosh Machane, casting our minds back to the days of Bnei Akiva in your terms during your university years. Sarah, I want to ask you first if you have any stories that come to mind from when you were Rosh of Machane, or to be honest, any Machane stories that you would like to share.
So Machane was just an amazing experience. You know, I think we still sit around and talk about it now to a certain degree, you know, like those sort of carefree days of responsibility, being in the middle of nowhere. When we took Machane, we would get dropped off in a field with nothing. We'd have to build the tents ourselves, you know, like the 10-man sleeping tents, and then the Chada Ochel tent and the Bet Knesset tent, which took about a day. And then there was pre-camp. And then the kids came, exactly. So there was when I was at Rosh Aleph Chalutzi, I was at the end of one enormous field, and Bet Base was at the other end of this field, which we couldn't even see them, it was so big. But the Rosh of Bet Base was Johnny Clark, who's a friend of ours today, still to today, and he couldn't get up in the morning. So I had to drive down the field and hoot outside his tent to wake him up every morning, and then drive back to my end of the field to carry on my Machane. So that was always very amusing. I think, you know, we were in the days of before cell phones, before mobile phones. So nobody had mobile phones. We didn't have mobile phones. We had like a walkie-talkies for the Rosh Machane that we'd talk to each other on walkie-talkies.
We still use those.
Really? That's
yeah.
You're
not guaranteed signal in these sites.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah.
of course.
Right.
And I just have like these happy memories of everybody standing on their chair at Machane and singing and doing Father Abraham. I don't know if you still know what that is. Rafi, I can see that you know
that song hasn't been sung for a while.
Oh, really? I'm
Yeah.
sure there's other songs that have taken its places. And some of the Tochniyot really like stick out. So, or for instance, I remember Aleph Winter, we had this great Madrachim's room where one of the Madrachim would always spend all of the Madrachim's meetings on his head. Don't ask. I have a photo to prove it. Or, you know, we used to have tuck. Do you know what tuck is?
We do.
Okay. Or actually, one of the best Tochniyot that I remember as a Chanicha and also as a Madricha was spending all day building a medieval village, and then the Cossacks coming and burning it down in the middle of a wedding or something, like, you know, and there was going like these extremes of atmosphere that was like we were reliving Jewish history, and it was coming to life. It was something that Bnei Akiva always did very well in that type of thing, I think. But actually, Jason's got a good Machane story. Do you want to tell a little good story?
So I will tell my Machane story. We had, when I was before Mazkir elect, I was Rosh Machane of Gimel in summer, and we were on at the first day of camp, as we described. So we were putting up the camp. So we were still putting up tents for the Madrachim, fighting the wind to put up the Chada Ochel and so on. And the Mazkir, who was Gil White at the time, came to visit us, and he had his van he was driving, and he parked it in the field, and we went in we had whatever discussion we had, and then we all went in to eat lunch. And while we were eating lunch, my scun, who was Isaac Warnon, said to me, "Keep him occupied, we've got something planned." So I sat and discussed, I don't remember what with Gil, ideology or Aliyah or something. And in the meantime, outside, the Sevet, led by Isaac, went and built a tent over Gil's car, a sleeping tent over the top of the car. And then when we finished eating, Gil came out with his keys in hand and said, "Okay, I'll be off now," and turned around to look for his car. And there was no car anywhere. There was just tents in the fields. And it took him about 10 minutes to figure out where his car actually was.
Brilliant. Jason, you mentioned that you were Mazkir. Can you know, that must have been an incredible experience. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, it was it was an incredible experience. Looking back now, I'm more terrified, I think, than I was at the time. And I didn't appreciate the responsibility that the position has with it. At some point in the summer when Machane were all up and running, I was in charge of, I don't remember, Israel Machane and Hachsharot were on their way, and there were camps all over the place. I was in charge of 1,500 children in 3 continents or something, and I was, 22. I'm like, what? Now it scares me. At the time, I thought it was perfectly normal. But it was, it was certainly an experience that shaped me. Initially, I didn't want to be Mazkir. I will say this. In fact, initially I wasn't doing anything for Bnei Akiva, but there weren't people volunteering for the Mazkirut. So the Rav Shaliach, Rav Yossi Chovav at the time, he pulled me over one evening after Limud and said, "Listen, there's no one on the Mazkirut. Perhaps you'll consider being, chinuch worker next year." So I went away and thought about it and said, maybe, okay, I can do it part-time, fit in my university some of the time and work for Bnei Akiva part of the time. We can make that work. So I agreed to that. And then he called me back again. He said, it's no good having a chinuch worker if there's no Mazkir. We're going to need you to be Mazkir. And I said, no. But he was fairly persuasive, apparently. So I said to my parents, going to be Mazkir at Bnei Akiva. And they said, well, if your university agrees, thinking there's no way the university was going to let me have a year off in the middle of my degree. But as I said, I was studying Jewish history. So I went to the head of department and I said, I want to take a year off to be Mazkir at Bnei Akiva. And she said, that's amazing. We encourage our students to do volunteer activities and that type of stuff. So they said, no problem at all. So to my parents' great dismay, I think I became Mazkir at Bnei Akiva. But it was an amazing year. It gave opportunities. I look back at speaking at the Yom Ha'atzmaut event after the chief rabbi in Raleigh Close in front of an audience of whatever 2,000 people. Opportunity to run and shape the movement. It was it was stuff that even now I look back and say it was a responsibility that now I'm not sure I'd take on. And certainly at that age, I was fairly introvert at the time, but being Mazkir meant I had to come out of myself and take control, and that's something that's stood me in good stead from then on.
Fantastic. For the next question, the two of you actually did allude to this earlier when speaking about how you guys met, and this is to do with Aliyah. If you'd be happy to share a little bit about your Aliyah journey and when, and I think you're going to say it's obvious, but why personally the two of you decided to make Aliyah, and when and why specifically at the specific time at which you made Aliyah.
So I think said before, it was clear to both of us that we were making Aliyah from very young. I don't think it was ever a question for either of us, although let's say we'll speak for herself afterwards. And then we both studied in Israel, but went back to England for university. And then it was I took it, as I say, a year out to be Mazkir, and then it was fairly clear that we wanted to make Aliyah at that stage and not start proper professional work life in England, because our feeling then was that the more you get involved, start working in a career, working your way up a professional ladder, start a family, at each stage it becomes harder and harder to get up and move. And therefore we said we're just going to do it right at the beginning, before we start anything else. And that added to the fact that, as I said, I wanted to come back and study in yeshiva. So that was made the decision fairly clear cut, that was when we were going to make Aliyah. It was always, as I said, it was always clear to us that we were going to make Aliyah. We say it now, particularly around the period of Yom Ha'atzmaut, Yom HaZikaron, Yom Ha'atzmaut, but not just. And our kids are fairly tired of hearing it from us. But we talk about the fact that Jews, for 2,000 years, Jews for 2,000 years prayed every day to be able to come back to Israel, and didn't have the opportunity and couldn't. And we now have the opportunity today to actually be here, live here. Particularly now, we feel that we have a son-in-law and son currently in the army, which makes Yom HaZikaron special, an even more meaningful experience. We said we've got an opportunity now that we have, our children. I also did the army, and we made Aliyah. We were slightly older, so I did not very much army, but I was in the army. But now, we feel we have, we're here, part of the, Jewish nation in our homeland, with our own soldiers defending where we should be. That's on a macro level, and on a micro level, when you hear people on the radio wish you Shabbat Shalom or Chag Sameach, we say this is where we should be and nowhere else.
What is the
Yeah. But we also know that, even though we live ideals and we both manage to find jobs and be happy in our careers, that it's not easy. There's no impression that it's just all, simple to just to get on the plane. You still have to learn Hebrew, and really learning Hebrew is probably, maybe one of the things that we really recommend. We came both with basic Hebrew, and we lived in places the first few years where we had to speak Hebrew. We weren't living in places where there were lots of Anglos. Which of course is fine to go and live in a place lots of Anglos, but if you really want to be able to feel part of the country, you really do need to speak Hebrew and be able to converse and to be able to, argue in Hebrew when you want to argue, as you do, or you want to haggle something down, which you want to do. So that's part of it is also making sure that you go to Upan when you get here and really work at the Hebrew, and it does come eventually. But it's a process. We've been here for 23 years. That's a long time. But I remember we got off the plane and not quite sure where we were, what we were doing, and we had to go through all the bureaucratic stuff. We got to this sort of plane that wasn't air conditioned at the time, and you didn't have a number, so you had to know you were after that person, they're after you, and all this stuff. Now it's much easier. But again, we're not saying it's an easy thing, but it's definitely the investment and the effort and the time and the belief. So,
right, definitely. Are there any closing words that you want to leave us with? A message for BAUK Chaverim?
Be proud of being part of Bnei Akiva. It's a wonderful movement. As you heard, it's definitely something that has built our lives in singularly and together. We are more than welcome to talk to anybody that wants to talk about Aliyah or about particular careers. Want to come and stay for Shabbat? We are happy to host. And if there's anything we can do to help for anybody that wants to make Aliyah or come to Midrashah or anything that we've spoken about, then we'll be delighted.
Yeah, I want to say our time, certainly our time when we were in Bnei Akiva, was formative in terms of who we are and what we believe in. Take the time, the debates, the arguments that you have as a Chanech, Madrich, Bulgarian Bnei Akiva, and stuff that doesn't come back. Occasionally, but rarely. You get caught up in the humdrum daily life, and those opportunities, to really thrash out what we believe and why we believe it. It's so important. So make the most of those opportunities and learn everything you can. And B'hatzlacha.
Thank you.
For that, Sarah and Jason, thank you so much. It has been quite inspiring to hear from you both, and it's great, particularly when our younger Chaverim are able to see a couple from the UK really make it happen, the hashkafa of Torah, Avodah, Aliyah, practically. And I hope you have, well, firstly, an amazing Shabbos, because at the time of recording this is Erev Shabbat. So thank you for coming on the Erev Shabbat, and also continue to be inspiring, I guess, not only for us, but to your local community in North Ayalon. So Hatzlacha, wishing everybody, well, if you're listening to this, good Shabbos, and Hashem Imachem.